So yes, there's neither a rabbit nor communion under here. Let me just confirm that. You will find out later, don't worry. So this morning we are looking at James 1 to 18, as we've just had read. Thank you for that. It's entitled Trouble and Testing, and I've added Seeing the Father of Lights. And I've decided that Cosmic shouldn't keep all the fun to themselves and have the monopoly on visual illustrations. Here are my props. You'll find out all about them in a moment. And I think James himself, the writer of today's passage, would absolutely approve, because the book of James is wonderfully visual. He does not just tell us ideas, he gives us pictures. Waves tossed about at sea, flowers scorched in the sun, mirrors, seeds and ships. James seems to appreciate that sometimes we better understand truth when we can picture it. So later on, I'm going to use a visual illustration to help us think about one of the big questions in this passage. Namely, when life is hard, through which lens do we see everything? Do we end up seeing God through hardship? Or can we learn to see hardship through what God has shown us about himself? But first, who exactly is this James? Because I'm the first person preaching in this new series, looking at the book of James, it's worth beginning by introducing the book as a whole. James is traditionally understood to be the brother, or half-brother, depending on how you view it, of Jesus himself, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it. James actually grew up alongside Jesus. And if you have siblings, perhaps just imagine for a moment what it might be like to have grown up with a genuinely perfect older brother. But despite that, James did not immediately believe Jesus was who he claimed to be. Something changed for James only after the resurrection. Then James became one of the leaders of the early church in Jerusalem and developed a reputation for wisdom and steadiness. And importantly, in the context of what we read here in chapter 1, this church knew hardship, poverty, famine, pressure, and persecution. So, when James writes about trials, he is not offering nice ideas from a distance. He's lived through difficulty, he's led others through difficulty, and his writing conveys that realism. The book itself feels practical, direct, and vivid. It echoes Jesus' teaching, especially the Sermon on the Mount, and it sounds a bit like the Proverbs too. Short, memorable wisdom for everyday life. So look out for these things as you read through the book. James is interested in how faith impacts real life. Things like a strained relationship, financial worry, temptation, exhaustion, and disappointment. James asks, what does trusting Jesus look like there? In truth, I've had a particular affection for this book for a very long time. I love how practical James is. He doesn't leave faith floating about like an interesting idea. He brings it right down into everyday life. He wants faith to work. And I love how visual he is. James always seems to be giving us something to picture, whether it be a mirror, a wave or a flower, wisdom that can be seen, and faith that can be seen. And perhaps most of all, I love James's ability to change perspective. He takes something familiar, for instance, suffering, wisdom, wealth, speech, temptation, and somehow turns it slightly so that we see it differently. Not unrealistically and not simplistically, but definitely more truthfully. And I think that's exactly what he's doing in the passage that we're looking at today. The Bible Project, which is a fantastic online resource, describes James chapter 1 almost like a doorway into the whole book. James introduces themes here that he will return to later on in the rest of the book, namely wisdom, trials, temptation, poverty and wealth, faith becoming action, wholeness, learning to live with integrity. It's good to notice those themes as we read chapter 1, and then again as they reappear in further chapters. But for this morning, I want us to notice one particular thread that runs through this opening passage and also through the whole book. How do we learn to see difficult circumstances truthfully as followers of Jesus? Because James says something rather startling very early on. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." And if we're honest, that sounds strange or difficult, or perhaps even slightly offensive if we hear it badly. Surely James is not saying suffering is pleasant. Surely he's not saying pain doesn't matter. Absolutely not. James is not naive. He knows hardship hurts. He is not saying enjoy suffering. He is saying, do not let suffering tell you the whole story. Because hardship can produce endurance. And endurance over time forms maturity. And another word for maturity would be wholeness. A faith that becomes integrated. A faith where what we believe about God begins to shape how we live under pressure. And then James says this: "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously." Notice how it seems James might be assuming that facing hardship might make us ask, how do I understand this? How do I walk through this? How do I not lose heart? Because James says, ask for wisdom. Now, we remember that wisdom isn't the same as intelligence or sheer knowledge. James's idea of wisdom here is deep and hard won. Wisdom means learning to see life truthfully before God, learning to live faithfully in the middle of uncertainty, learning how to interpret hardship without losing sight of God's character. And that brings us to our visual illustration, hopefully. Okay. There we go. So, not everybody will be able to see what I've set up here. So there is also the projection to help us out this morning as well. So here we have a stand with fairy lights and Father of Lights written on it. And I want you to imagine that this represents God. Later on in the passage, James describes God as the Father of lights in the ESV version of the Bible, or the Father of the heavenly lights in the NIV. Now, get the right way around. In front of the lights, I've added a transparent filter. This represents God's character. On the filter are written several attributes of God's character, all arranged in a large circle. Generous, faithful, kind, good, loving, unchanging, near, trustworthy, wise. It's also generous, the giver of every good and perfect gift, the God in whom there is no shifting shadow. Right. And now I've added this other lens, or filter, that stands for hardship. It's cloudy and represents fear, disappointment, pain, confusion, pressure, exhaustion, loss, all of which are written haphazardly on this cloudy filter. Now, here is the question, what comes first? Because whenever hardship comes, and it comes to all of us, we interpret life through something. A disappointment happens, a diagnosis comes, someone we love struggles, the prayer feels unanswered. And very naturally, we begin to see everything through that experience. So what happens if hardship becomes the lens through which we look at God? Now, in my illustration here, hardship is front and foremost, behind which are God's character and God. The real life conclusions may sound like this. God must have abandoned me. God is not kind. God cannot be trusted. This pain tells me who God is. And noticeably, James doesn't condemn us for struggling like that. After all, the Psalms are full of cries like, "How long, Lord? Where are you? Why does this hurt?" The Bible is honest, but James wants to teach us wisdom. So what if we reverse the order? Got to get it right. What if we place the character of God first? I'll do this first. And as I move the hardship filter to one side, the hardships are still there, but are no longer our filter for seeing God, the Father of lights. Not denying hardship, not pretending pain is pleasant, not tying everything up artificially neatly either, but allowing what we know of God to frame our view of God and interpret hardship through that lens, that God is generous, God is faithful, God is not cruel, God is not the author of darkness. God has shown his heart in Jesus. God meets us in suffering. God gives wisdom generously. The hardship is still real. The questions may still exist. The pain may very well still hurt. But something changes. Instead of this pain proves God is not good, wisdom enables us to say, I do not understand this, but I will interpret it through what I know of God. And that, I think, is one of James's great invitations. We could have the lights back on if you like. We can learn to see hardship through the lens of God's character rather than seeing God through the lens of hardship. Let's make this relevant to ordinary life. Imagine someone carrying disappointment, something hoped for did not happen, a prayer feels unanswered. Through the lens of hardship, God has forgotten me. But through the character of God, Father, I do not understand this, but give me wisdom. Help me trust you here. Or imagine someone watching a person they love struggle, a child, a parent or friend. Through hardship, we are abandoned, but through the lens of God's character, Father of lights, help us love well, give us wisdom for the next step. Or someone simply exhausted, the knife feels very heavy, the pressure never quite lifts. Through hardship, I am on my own here, but through the lens of God, you are generous. Meet me here. Give me wisdom for today. It's not pretending things are fine. It's deciding which lens shall I choose. And then James gives us this beautiful phrase. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. The Father of lights, what a simply beautiful name for God. From our perspective, almost all the heavenly lights that we see in the sky move. The sun rises and sets. The moon changes shape. Shadows move. Our circumstances change. Our emotions shift and our confidence wavers. But James says, God does not shift like that. He is not kind one day and cruel the next, generous one day and withholding the next, near one day and absent the next. James says, hold on to this when life is hard. God is steady, God is good, God is love, and every good and perfect gift comes from him. So as we begin this series in James, these verses invite us to take these questions into the upcoming week. What lens am I looking through? Am I seeing God through hardship? Or can I ask God for wisdom to begin seeing hardship through the lens of who he is, the Father of lights who gives generously? James does not promise easy lives, but he does promise God's wisdom, and he tells us exactly where to go for it. If any of you lacks wisdom, ask God who gives generously. So we can ask for wisdom frequently and liberally whenever we need it. Ask in disappointment, ask in confusion, ask when under pressure, even in the ordinary difficult of a Monday morning. And trust that the Father of lights is still good, even as we are learning to see clearly.